Hi everybody, I'm Brian. Let's go do some woodworking. Today's video is brought to you by Atlas 46. They're the makers of the tool belt that I've been wearing all day and several other things that I use here in the shop. They're a great company. They make really nice quality items. This is called the Hamilton Woodworker, and it was designed specifically for woodworkers. It fits a block plane and a small square and rulers, and it's really specific to woodworking and working in the shop and finished carpentry. And it's a great little tool that I've really come to use every day here in the shop. Okay, so again, I'm gonna use the joint that I've already made, the half of the joint that I've already made, to help me lay out the rest of the joint. And I'm gonna do that by coming over here with the open face mortise and lowering the table saw blade so that it is going to cut just slightly less. I don't want to be flush with it because that's too much. I want to be just under. I don't mind cutting away a little bit of the wood afterwards. So just under the thickness that I need. Push that blade around, make sure, yeah, that's going to be fine. So now I have my height adjusted, and I'm using a stop block over here, and I've lined it up with one of the teeth and my cut line. And you can see that little cut line from the other side that I sort of extended around the corner lines up perfectly when I butt up against here, so I can make a cut on both faces, make a cut, and they're going to match exactly. So here we go. So now I've come over to the bandsaw and I'm going to do the same thing I did on the table saw. I'm going to use the part of the joint that I already made to lay out for the next part of the joint. And in this case, I want the teeth to cut on the outside of that mortise. So I want to give myself a little bit of extra material. I don't want to cut too much and make my tenon too small. So I'll set it there, and we'll make an initial cut, and we'll see how tight it is. And then as I want the joint to come tighter and tighter, I'm just going to scooch the fence over little by little and make that tenon smaller and smaller until I get a perfect fit. So you can see, because I left the blade on the table saw a little too low, I still have that little bit of wood left inside the joint, which is what I want. You don't want to cut too much. So even though this is a small joint, it's important to say, even though it's a small joint, these same rules apply for a large bridle joint. In this case, we're doing something small on a small scale, but all these procedures are exactly what would happen if this piece of wood was 3 inches wide. It wouldn't make any difference at all. So I'm going to cut the knife right up against the shoulder, just to score a little deeper, and then I'm going to take a chisel and remove that one little piece of wood out of there. So now I have a nice square shoulder against the back side. I'm going to flip the piece and do the same thing on the other side. Cut. Pare away that last little piece of wood. Now the other thing, I've left the joint just a little tight because sometimes with bandsaws you get a little bit of roughness on the surface there. So now this is two-sided adhesive backed sandpaper, and it's just stuck to a piece of block of wood, and I use it like a file just to clean that surface up just a little bit. And I can do the same thing on the other side. The joint should be completely ready to assemble and finished. Nice and tight all the way around. No slop, the pieces are nice and tight. So that's ready to glue together. So just before I do any jointing, this is my jointing plane. It's very much like the plane that I made in the video that you can look up on my channel. That one was a smoothing plane. This is a jointing plane. It's a little longer than the other plane. This one is 19 inches long, and it has a smaller blade. It's a 1 1/4 inch blade. But I haven't flattened the bottom for a long time, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to flatten the bottom. Before I make the bottom flat, though, I have to make sure that the blade is in the plane and under tension. But obviously I just sharpened my blade, so I don't want to wreck my blade on the sandpaper. So the blade is withdrawn high enough up into the plane that it's not going to hurt anything. I've stuck my finger in the bottom there, and I'm just keeping the blade up nice and high. And then I'll put my wedge in and set the wedge so that everything's under tension. So if there's any movement in the body of the plane, that's happening right now. And now I can go ahead, after that's done, and flatten the bottom and see where my high spots are, if there are any. And if there aren't too many, I won't spend too much time here. But it's worth, with wooden planes, just doing this little bit of maintenance every now and then, see where it's at. And then we'll be able to see real clearly that almost the entire bottom of the plane is becoming dull, except for there's some shininess in this area in front of the mouth, which is the area that receives probably most of the wear. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. It's quite flat. I'll do some more flattening here, but that's pretty good. It stayed very stable. So this goes to show that wooden planes can be used for many years. I made this plane about 8 years ago, and that's how flat it stayed in 8 years of fairly constant use. So that's pretty good. Okay, so before I glue these up, I'm going to check them and see if there's any small variations in squareness. And I want a nice jointed edge on here, a perfectly straight jointed edge. And I'm going to do that with a hand plane. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my blade is centered over the wood, and I can see that it is. I'm using my hand over here like a guide to hold that blade and keep it centered over the wood. And I'm going to make 2 passes. The first pass is going to cut just after the beginning of the piece, and I'm going to stop right before I get to the end. And what that's going to do is it's going to make a slight hollow over the length of the piece. Now when I say slight, we're talking about thousandths of an inch. It's very little. I don't want to bow the outside surface of this piece by planing it a bunch of times. So I'm just going to plane from about here to about here. And then I'm going to make a full pass, and that should be nice and square and straight. A little bit more. You can see that the plane is able to get a lot more accuracy than the machine will. So I can see that I'm cutting more on one edge a little bit, so I'm going to move the plane over. Okay. And now I'll do a pass on the whole thing. Cut set very lightly, so I'll do one more. And there we go, I got a full length, nice clean shaving out of there. So I'm pretty confident that that will be a nice straight edge, but I'm going to check it anyway with a square. And I'm going to make sure, I have a machinist ruler here, I'm going to make sure that's dead straight and dead flat, which it is. So I'm going to do that same procedure on all the edges of these boards. Okay, so we've test fit our joint. It fits very nicely. I've jointed all the edges. I know they're all straight and perfect and true and square, which is important because we're making a square. And then we're going to take the nice machine square and use it as a jig for doing our glue up. And I'm going to sit that joint together right where I want it. Pin that in on there. Now that that's there, we can start adding some glue. Alright, maybe I'll just add a little bit inside shoulders of this. So that as I put it together, it squeezes a little extra glue into the joint. I don't mind if it's messy because I'm going to clean it afterwards. So that's pretty good. Now I'm going to squeeze those together. And I'm going to check, make sure that's tight. Put some clamps. Hold this part on the ruler. Happy with that, that looks good. I'm going to put one clamp in the center of the bridle joint just to hold it while the glue dries. I have a little wet cloth here I can just use to get a little bit of that glue cleaned up. And while that dries, we'll make the next part. Okay, so my next step here is I've made a stretcher that I want to attach to both legs of the square to keep it rigid and perfectly square all the time. So I have a nice little piece of contrasting curly maple that will look nice on there, and I've milled it to the size that I want. It's square on all sides and flat and straight. And now we're going to cut some miters on it and create some dovetails.